Welcome to Middle Fingers Up. I am your host, Kieran. And okay, today, what are we going to talk about? So today's conversation is probably going to feel familiar for a lot of you. And I appreciate my guest today because it's one of those things that feels familiar, but then we just don't know how to get it out. We don't know how to talk about these things. And so my guest and I are going to do that with you today. And I think really what today's about is many of us have this experience growing up in this like in between. We're not fully this and we're not fully that. And then we grow up and then we're like, oh, I think I should explore what that middle piece is, what that in between is. And so a lot of us are doing this, going back, looking at our identity, questioning things about our culture, the way we grew up, the way the world is on fire and everything in between. And I think that impacts all of us and who we are. And I'm really excited to have our guest here today because Harleen, she comes with so many different intersections. She was a little baby when she came to Canada from India. And she calls Toronto home. But like many of us, identity wasn't something that she inherited, as we all know. It was something she had to navigate, question, and build. And look, I know that for a lot of us as teenagers in our developmental milestone, identity is a huge thing. Kind of at 12, but really at 14 and onward, we really start questioning a lot of outside of us. If we're religious, is that where I want to be? What are our parents doing? What are they not doing? All of that. And I think when you are a person of color or a child of immigrants or an immigrant, I think there's an added layer to that because you are growing up in a world that maybe your parents don't know how themselves to navigate. And so it becomes a little bit confusing on so many levels for us. And so I appreciate having Harleen here because she's going to help us unpack that today. So she spent years working in the corporate world, living that perfect kind of sense on paper, career and life until I guess she realized this isn't really making sense. And so she left that world. And recently she's also experienced the kind of loss that changes you forever, the passing of her mother. And so she's been working through that grief, as I said, leaving this career. And in the midst of all of this, she's also navigating motherhood and I think a lifetime of being othered for her body and figuring all that out as she parents her daughters. And I think what really stood out to me in my conversation with her in the consult is that she has made some choices. And I think landing is scary for some of us. She's made a choice to create. She's made a choice to express. She's made a choice to finally take up the space that we keep talking about. And she's here for it and she's not leaving. So Harleen, welcome,
Yes.
fellow Randhawa. We both have the same last name. We both talked about our maiden last name. So spoiler alert, that is how I hooked her when I DM'd her and was like, from one Randhawa to another. So that was kind of cute when she responded back. So welcome, you're here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. So I'm just going to kind of get into it with you right away. So this conversation about identity, grief, our bodies, the pressure we inherit, all that lovely stuff, the lives that we build and everything. I feel like today's theme, a lot of it is what happens when a woman stops performing her life and starts expressing it. And I kind of feel like that's where you're at. You're in this unlocking what it means to be a creative and express. Art is your calling. That's how you hooked me when I saw your beautiful, bright messages through your artwork on the socials. So I'm just going to get into it right away and ask you. So for you, when in your life would you say you realize, okay, maybe I'm not expressing myself. I might actually be performing this life that's maybe been told how to perform or live or what? Like, when was the aha moment for you to be like, I need a change?
I think for me, per se, like with the things that I went through in life, I don't think it was like an immediate aha. I think there were certain things that I went through that made me like question the role that I was playing in society, within my community, within my family. And the first thing that just I think set it off was like my mom passing when I was 21 years old. And even before then, she was first diagnosed when I was 12. So I think at a very young age, I had to become very mature and take on a lot of responsibility. So I got even more entrenched in the good daughter, eldest daughter role. And then when your anchor basically is not there anymore, your perspective in life starts to shift slowly. Like for me, my mom really came from the generation, she got married very young at the age of 18. And for her, in terms of survival, was stability. And that came through my dad. That came through economic stability. So for me, I've always thought that getting married, having a good job, being financially independent was the right thing to do. And even though I had this passion within me from a very young age, I used to love to draw and create. But I think our family and our communities encourage it more as a hobby more than anything. And for me, after that, I started formulating my own thoughts and really didn't see much of, like, say, on Pinterest, like, I didn't see much of South Asian art beyond what's out there, you know what I mean? Like, not much diversity. And I feel like my art is at the intersection of affirmational art, and I try to incorporate bigger bodies and darker skin tones as much as I can, because I don't see that inclusiveness in much South Asian artwork. And I feel like those kind of like people that are bigger or considered darker don't have that representation in South Asian art. So that is my own lived experience. And I feel like we're all constantly changing and experiencing different things in life in order to build on our perspective and worldview. So for me, it took me 10 years trying to like figure out what just like constant redirection, rejections, to finally get to the point where like how many how many like doors shut do I need to actually realize that I need to like tap into what the little Harleen needed and what sparks joy in myself after, especially after motherhood. I think I reached the pinnacle of like, oh, I'm married now, I have a kid, and in the perspective of the South Asian community, I am successful in that way. But after having my first daughter, love her to death, the first feeling I felt was of like feeling hollow. And then the second feeling was protection, because she is a daughter, like a member of the, like a daughter in the South Asian community. So I think that in itself got the wheels turning in me for creating this type of artwork that I do create, if that answers your question.
Oh no, you said so many wonderful things, but I think where I have to go back to is I owe you an apology. When we met in our consult, I thought you said your mom passed away 14 months ago, and I realized you were 21 years old. So I'm so sorry, because I definitely heard a different number when we were talking, and so I definitely owe that to you. I'm sure you hit different levels and new levels of grief as now you've entered motherhood, and maybe that's where I got the vibe that it was like a new grief. But my apologies for getting that wrong. So I was like,
No worries, I
I
didn't
need to
realize
say
you got
that.
it wrong.
Yeah. I just
Grief
out
does
myself,
feel
I
that
guess.
way. Grief does feel that way, because for me, like the trajectory I was on with my parents, like my mom specifically. My dad was a truck driver, constantly on the road. The parenting came through my mom, so it was a very like big moment in my life when my mom passed away. And like, what do I do now? She wanted me to get an arranged marriage with the guy of her choice. So I with the fact that she got sick when I was very young, me and my sisters walked around eggshells, not trying to upset her. So we were very in a really like tight box of like what the South Asian community requires of girls, and especially us being in a household of three girls. My mother really held closely the concept of like Ijit and like so many layers. And then when she passed away, like that anchor that was in your life, you start to question these kind of things as you're going through life and different life phases. And even motherhood was so highly praised. And when I went through it, not only did I miss her because it was such a hard thing to go through, and a lot of people around me were having kids and they had their mothers to lean on. So like that isolation of like, and I had my first daughter during COVID. It just it's not for the weak of heart is how I felt. And I'm like, what, like, why is this so sold to women in our, like, women in general? Even though down the line maybe I would have had a kid, or I like maybe I wouldn't, like, I don't know, I can't say like what path I would have taken if I came from different sets of like values, or like whatever was instilled into me when I was younger. But at the same time, like for me, it was like looking behind the like lifting the veil. Is that the saying?
I know, I'm so bad at it, so I don't know.
Yeah, so
But
like
yeah,
it
I
just
think so.
really, I think that was one of the things I think really set me off to find what, yes, I love my kids, they're part of my life, and I love to be their mother, but who am I, Harleen, beyond being a daughter, beyond being a sister, a wife, a mother, a niece? Like, what, who am I besides those roles that I play? And I think within that, like, I think a lot of South Asian women, girls can truly relate to that feeling of what is my role. Usually it's, ever since you're born, it's considered, like, I know society's changing, girls are considered equal, but in most ways they aren't. They're seen as burdens. They're going to go to their own house after getting married, and that concept is still there. And we talked about getting married, like we do all of these like rituals and rasams of, like, for example, maya or doing dodli. Like, why aren't we as a generation questioning the things that we're doing? Does it still apply to the values that we have today, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you said so many amazing, important things. And I think this is why I know I was meant to have this conversation with you. You have so many important life lessons that I think from the loss of your mother are like branching out into all these other, as you've said, intersections, and have taught you so much. And I think that question of questioning is something that is often frowned upon, because if you even think about it, even if you go back to colonization, everyone walked the straight line and someone's coming to your own country and telling you how you have to live. How can that not get passed on through generations and generations to now here we are? And, don't ask, don't tell, just follow is the way many households are brought up. And I think to ask that question in there of like, who am I? Like, who am I as a person outside of all these different wonderful, but all these different labels? And then to question some of these rituals and things. I think those are like pretty brave ass things for our women, for people like you to be doing, because it's scary for the generations ahead of us, above us, to have that brushed up, because they may have questioned it, but they really didn't seek the answers, at least.
Yeah.
And I do hear young people today asking these kinds of questions and like not stopping at them. And I'm like, I have a lot of respect for that, because it's not that what was the way it was wrong. It served a purpose or whatever, but we are growing as humanity. And so like we have to also like be okay to flow with that a bit, keep some rituals, keep, traditions, keep beliefs, people celebrate religion, all these kinds of things. But there are things in there that are not serving us as a community, that are allowing us to raise the bar. And that's the part I think I hear a lot from you, and even in our consult. So I'm going to go backwards with you for a second.
Yes.
Because you're like one of the best guests where I don't even have to ask you questions. You've answered like 30 of them in that. So I love this. But I want to start with, and you kind of said doing a little heart, like going back to little Harleen. So I do like to ask my guests this time machine question of like, if you're going to get into this time machine, totally safe. I promise. I've done the oil change and everything on it. Get in it with me. Let's go back. I want to know like what what age are you going to go back to visit yourself? What do you see? And I'm curious, like, what would you tell yourself at that age, knowing what you know now?
I recently discovered journals that I've written in and just wrote about things that would concern me at the age of 12. I kind of did the math because I used to write the date on all the journals. And I would go back at the age of 12 because I feel like that's when a lot of things were happening. Like my mom had gotten cancer as a 12-year-old. Like, what does that mean? Is she going to be okay? Like, and also at the time, I just got my period, my body's changing. What does that also mean? So just going back to that age and just really just giving a lot of kindness to the little Harleen and just reassuring her that everything's going to be okay, that regardless of her body, because I feel like during like my growth spurt, I feel like the body changed to the in a way where it wasn't considered the ideal beauty standard, because from I think a lot of girls for at a young age were kind of molded for the marriage market, and if we look a certain way, or if we're not learning things that are going to benefit us in after marriage, those things are kind of looked down upon. And for me, it was my fatness. My fatness has always been an issue, even in that standard when I was 12 years old. Maybe to an outsider, I wouldn't have been considered fat, but that was the rhetoric ever since I hit puberty. And it just got worse and worse. And I think at the end of the day, you just need to fight back and really question why people have the sense of fat phobia. Even if, like, for example, my partner, there's a lot of phobia in terms of my in-laws. Like, there wasn't any questioning as to what what the standard of beauty is and why can't we challenge that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me, that was a thing that I think I worked through up until, and I'm still working through, because society is always throwing stuff our way. Now it's like the skinny epidemic. It just keeps on
Yeah, the
being.
Kardashians lost a bunch of weight, and
Yeah,
now we have to. Yeah, it's like such a capitalistic sort of mindset that we have to follow. And like I've seen this too. I work out with people, and I've been there too myself, where you're working out to look stronger, you're working out to look fit, you're working out to look a certain way. And so much of our community has conditioned us on our outer shell.
yeah,
And it fits so perfectly with what the beauty standards out there are.
yeah,
And it's almost worse, I find. Like, we have so much more knowledge, but then it's also worse because we didn't have Botox and fillers and all that kind of stuff in the way young women today can access. And so
yeah,
they're up against quite a bit as well today. And it's like, because the knowledge is there. We didn't have the knowledge then. Now they have the
yeah,
resources and the knowledge. And I think there's so many conflicting messages that are constantly sent out about what we, as you said, to fit the marriage market. And the Indian film industry didn't help either,
no,
when the only 10 beautiful women that looked in the beautiful way they did were on our big screen thousands of times a year when we'd go watch them. And outside of that, none of us look like that. And then the white people are like, oh, how come you don't look like that Bollywood actor? And you're like,
yeah,
go fuck yourself.
yeah,
Like you don't look like Scarlett Johansson, so shut up.
yeah,
It's just, it's,
exactly.
like all these kinds of layers. And so I feel for you when and fat shaming is like the hardest part of it all,
Yeah,
because I'm imagining like going to stores and the way the world's gaze is. Let's talk about that. Let's go there. Like what would, let's even start with, you have a beautiful part of your art where, and you talked in the consult, where at 12 you wrote letters to God. And you
yeah,
ask God why you
be
don't look the
normal.
way. Yeah. So can we start there, and let's talk about this if you feel okay to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I feel okay talking about it. I think now having two daughters myself, I think I want to advocate it more than ever, that that fatness shouldn't be villainized. I think a lot of people think that they can, like aunties are brutal, like they'll say it to your face. Or even I've gone to Indian clothing suits and lengas at a Indian store. They'll tell you like you're too big, you're not gonna get inside here. I was like, okay, cool. I'll try to figure it out on my own. But even stores like for example H&M, if you take that for example, just recently, I noticed they quietly took away a lot of XXL and like 3X and 4X. And if fashion isn't accessible, like how is I think I personally I think I feel cute when I wear something that reflects my fashion sense. And if it's not available, that's like further putting a person in a fatter body like to make them feel more worse about themselves. So things like that, and then what body types my daughters are going to be. I just want them to see representation of many different bodies. Like, for example, there's another illustration of Indian women with like back rolls. That's how my back looks like now after having kids. I've gained weight. I had back-to-back pregnancies and many other like conditions that don't allow like, oh, just like an easy fix of just, oh, go hit the gym and like do a diet and like just lose that weight quickly. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
I quickly learned that it
Eat
doesn't work
less,
that
move
way.
more, girl.
Yeah. So I was just looking at my page and my 5-year-old, she's like, "Oh, that's such a nice picture, Mama. Like it's so pretty." I'm like, "What do you like about it?" She's like, "The body." I was like, "Oh my God."
I
I'm like, this
know.
is what I do, why I do things, because if they're constantly seeing like what a certain type of body out there, it's like so it's sometimes very obvious, but also not so obvious at the same time when they're like watching their shows, watching movies. Like if there's only one type of body represented, obviously that's not going to be considered normal in their eyes.
No. And I mean,
So
look at how we grew up, right? Like
yeah,
for us, it was, and at least for me, it was all white. So
yeah,
straight, blonde hair, blue eyes, fake ass tan skin, but my dark skin wasn't like, it didn't hit that, right? It wasn't good
yeah,
enough. Skinny, the low rider jeans that Brittany and them brought in. Like, I was like, oh man, like, first of all, I'm not even allowed to show my belly. Like,
yeah,
let alone now this is the fashion sense. So there was all these things that, you're up against that your they're gonna have their own challenges, but to have a mom who not only has experienced it, but also like knows, even to ask the question of like, what do you like about it? You're helping her build her critical thinking, not just,
yeah,
oh, that's great that you like it. Thank you.
yeah,
But you're curious about it. And I think that's the key to parenting is that curiosity of building their critical thinking. So she thinks for herself.
for sure. And another layer that I also internally work through is that like when I was growing up, I was the bigger sister. I was the odd one out, and like for my mom, like obviously considering her like how she grew up and everything, to her being bigger was not desirable for the marriage market. So like my diet was restricted. I was constantly, if I felt like I was gaining weight, I would kind of like try to hide it because she would like put me on the scale and like it'd be a whole thing like, oh, Harleen's gained weight, like what diet plan can we put Harleen on? And obviously that resulted in disordered eating in my part. And to this day, I try to decenter food all the time. I try not to think about like how food is a reward. How can I reward myself that is not related to that? And also being a mother and right now providing a diet, like food and diet to my kids, how I think I sometimes overcorrect. Like I don't want to shame them and be like, "Oh, you can't eat that fourth cheese drink." We need to
Yeah.
diversify and have a different nutrition, things like that. I come from that perspective, but I also like think of the little Harleen where she was just restricted entirely, and I just don't want them to feel it in any sort of way how I felt, you know?
And I think you make a really good point about that overcorrection and that when we don't go back and do the inner child work throughout life as adults, it really owns us and it kind of runs how our adulthood is going to be. And not, I don't believe every single person out there, or there's very many people out there that had the perfect childhood. I think we have good, bad, and ugly, but a lot didn't have the best upbringing, because especially us with immigrant parents, there's a lot of layers there, what they didn't know, how they were surviving, all of that. And so I think for you, where you're at, that mention of overcorrecting, I think a lot of us do that on so many different levels in aspects of our life that we don't quite see, where if you have parents that hit you, there's like so much autonomy with the child, but now the child's so anxious because they're like, you're giving me too many choices. It comes up in all these kinds of different ways. And so I'm curious, like for you, and particularly with the body image stuff, like how do you balance that overcorrecting, and how do you manage that? Like what's the thing that you and your husband kind of focus on?
Well, my husband and me have totally different like body types, and I think he hasn't thought about it in a way I have thought about things in terms of like our bodies, because he has a very fast metabolism. It's kind of annoying.
Of course, naturally.
Yeah, but he has learned a lot through me, and I think it's how diet culture just kind of seeps in at a very young age. You got to be very protective, and how I try not to overcorrect is I'm being critical of like what I'm saying or the way I'm interpreting things. Like if my daughter right now, if it were up to her, she'd have candy all the time.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
But yeah, candy's great, but at the same time, like you gotta like frame it in a way and be like, yeah, candy's nice, we can have it later, but maybe we can have food that gives us energy, and kind of like diversify it. Like, hey, maybe you ate this like 3-4 times today, maybe let's try a different snack. So just trying to be aware of like what I say. And I'm not sure how they're gonna interpret their childhood when they grow up.
I know, they're all gonna go to therapy too.
Yeah,
so
they're gonna go
they're
to
not
therapy
any better
some
than
sort
us.
of way.
But you know what? Like I talked to a lot of women in different kind of conversations, but we kind of come to the same conclusion of when you are paving a path that hasn't been paved for you, like you don't have something to go and, like check in with. You're just kind of trial and error. Like we are breaking cycles and trying to build new ones at the same time. And it's exhausting to be on top of something like that when you yourself have a relationship with that too, no matter how much therapy and how much work you've done. It's still, part of our identity from childhood. It does, no matter what work we do, it doesn't just go away. It still sits, whether it's in the back pocket or front pocket, wherever. So that to me, like when I hear you say that, I'm like, girl, that's like exhausting too, because you're trying to pave this like healthy way for your kid. Much like that beautiful picture of the little girl and her mother. And what does she say in there? She says, how does she say I have to live my life?
Actually, so that picture can be interpreted in two ways. I intended it like me talking to my younger self, but like I've gotten comments that like, oh, I also interpret it as like you talking to a kid and your daughter. Yeah, it also applies that way as well. So, but the younger kid saying, well, I have to disappear to be loved. And the older self is saying, no, I made a life where you get to shine.
Yeah.
And I think that one, I feel like just healed something in me, because I do look to my younger self, like to know that I was lovable all along. There wasn't restrictions as to like, I had to be skinnier, I had to be smarter, I had to have like the perfect job for someone to love me and be proud of me. And I think that's a lot of what, like, I think brown kids in general, the immigrant kids that go through life feel this way. And I think a lot of immigrants have like financial insecurity, and I think that's also another complex that we all try to get through as well. Because for me, art and being a creative wasn't like an immediate thing, because for me, coming from a situation where there was financial insecurity, I always leaned towards something that would provide financial security. In my head, oh, art's a hobby, it's not going to provide stability, I can't help out my parents get out of these kind of financial situations. So obviously that went back to the back burner. But I also say that it also comes with like privilege to like go into these jobs in terms of like creative jobs, because I don't know where I would have been if I had the encouragement at the young age of like, oh, Harleen, you're great. You should pursue this. I've had teachers tell my parents that, like, oh, Harleen should get into art programs, but no one really took it seriously and didn't think it was something that can be pursued.
Yeah. So you did go to the corporate world
Yeah.
and you found financial stability. I know we're kind of moving from the body image stuff to your work, but I'm sure that the stuff is all going to flow through. How did you come to that? That's a scary decision, like you said, right? Like, and we live in like pretty expensive times too to be able to afford a basic thing such as garlic, which is
Yeah.
ridiculous how much all that costs. So,
Yeah.
and you're right. At the same time, it's a privilege to be able to do what both of us are doing in the creative world. I would agree with you too on that.
Yeah.
So how did you get to the place kicking down that good girl mentality too? Because you're supposed to check box everything and shine in the way of being married, having kids, and having this great job. So where did you make the decision to say,
Yeah.
that's not for
Y-
me?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's first kick started off to after my mom passed away. I was like, why am I putting these rules on myself? And then I got into the events industry like solely out of like, I need to start like making money help out my dad. And from there it just like spiraled into a 10-year career. And never once did I ask, oh, like do I even like doing like what I'm doing? And I think when I had my daughter and it was COVID, I think a lot of people were free, a lot of thinking happening, a lot of self-reflection. And I think slowly I've always dabbled with it since then on the side, but just recently I feel like I do have the privilege that I can try to do this full time now with the support of my dad and my husband. I get to do this, but even more so, hopefully, I'll even get to immerse myself even further as my daughters get independent as well, because that's also a job in itself, like caretaking two rambunctious kids as well. So I think some people have the privilege to explore it at a younger age, but it comes with like the financial privilege and also like maybe their parents being very accepting of kids going to like a creative or art related career. But it took me 34 years and that was my journey, and I had to go through what I had to go through to realize that this is my path.
I think many would share what you're sharing. Like, you do have to go through this journey because it's all these barriers come up, whether it's like feeling, that you're the eldest daughter too, and the caretaking piece, the financial stigma around these kinds of people think we're wishy-washy when we're artsy and creative. And then their parents, they didn't necessarily live like that, right? You worked in the way that you worked to make a genuine living. And so I think when I had messaged you, the thing that stood out about your work and what you're doing is like, art or expression is so needed in all of us, and we lose our innocence at such a young age, and some lose it younger than they should. It's taken from them, and as we get older, it's still there and it's still asking for something. Like, we come from such a creative community as South Asians. If you look at our ancestors and just like
Yes.
how expression was brought about as a community, and
Yes.
that was been taken away. And I think I meet a lot of women, I meet a lot of immigrant women that have like so much talent and skill, but there's this like they don't have it in them, or there's lots of these things getting in the way of them to pursue that. And so
Yeah.
like for women like yourself that kind of needed the push and did what you did to get to where you are, and other women that maybe don't have that kind of support, like what would you say to them to help them kind of reframe why expression is also important, whether it's a hobby or you're getting paid for it?
I feel like, as I mentioned, we have all these roles that we have to play, and our kids are going to grow up one day, and you really need to evaluate what gives you joy. And I think a couple of years ago, I really tried to start tapping into like what joy means to me. Like I was going through a life and I'm like, I haven't had a deep belly laugh with someone. Like, why is life so serious? And why can't I just be more whimsical and just, like tap into what gives me the most joy? And for me, it's like art and creating. And for maybe someone else, maybe something else. But I think it's very important to nurture what gives you joy in life, because this life is very short and long at the same time. And I can't just imagine just trucking through life just because it's tough in the moment. It doesn't mean you have to make it a full career, but I think you got to give it to yourself to constantly revisit what gives you joy in life in order for yourself to feel more fulfilled, and also like to decenter your jobs. If you die, they're gonna fill your position within a few hours. So I think I got many examples of that, like in my career, that no matter how much hard work I put in, at the end of the day, I am a number. And I think what gives me joy and value in what I'm doing is that even if it doesn't make me a huge amount of money, I think what I'm putting out there, if it makes an impact and creates a community around it and creates some sort of change and shift in how people like converse and think about certain topics. And even I think about death all the time too, because I saw my mom die. And just to think about like one day when I'm not here, what am I leaving behind? For me, I'm always trying to piece together what would have my mom thought like about a certain thing, or I came across certain like journals of her where she did doodles and wrote some stuff. Like I'm not here, I'm piecing together what she would have been like when if she were still alive today. But if I'm not here one day, my daughters will not have that question. They will know what mom thought about the world. So I think it's also just being true to yourself. And I think when you're being authentic and your most authentic self, it just radiates off you.
So when you do piece together like parts of your mom and what she would hope, like what do you put together? Like what's the story that you're kind of weaving as you get older?
For me, I feel like yes, we are generationally like healing and creating change in our generation. And I feel like in her own way, she created change from the generation before her. And I'm just continuing that cycle. And I think I it's hard to say like what she would have thought or said. Like we can't predict a person's growth and learning. Like since she was a young mom, she passed when she was 42. So I'm 34 now, and I'm reaching that age, and I constantly think about like how she was thinking, looking back at pictures. Oh, she would have been like in her 30s in this age, constantly trying to picture like how she would have navigated. She had three girls. I'm like, I don't know how she did it, but I think you can just somewhat piece together like how she mothered me, and I'm sure she mothered me in a way where I became a feminist, and in her own way she probably was as well, but it wasn't quite obvious.
Yeah.
For her, she wanted her daughters to be financially independent, and she wanted us to have happy and fulfilling lives. But in certain ways, she had her own way of thinking that, like, oh, certain things will cause them to have stability. And it was out of love. And I can take that with me and like times it by 10 and push it forward to my daughters, and that is my privilege. And she may have not had that privilege, my grandmother even more so, and even my great grandmother. So I reflect upon that all the time. Like our ancestors in their own ways have pushed the cycle forward, and I am here also pushing the cycle forward. So
For your daughters too, as they get older, I think they have a really nice foundation beneath them to be able to push it forward as they get older as well. And like you and I were talking about this the other day, just there's a lot going on in the world, and we have a lot of care for a lot of women and children and people that don't have the kind of privileges that you and I do. And so how do you work through that dark side, the realities of what's happening, the impact that has on, people like you and I that are still far removed? And I don't never want to remove the privilege in this conversation, because I want it to be clear, like, we are privileged. Now you're raising these little girls. And so how do you put all of what's happening and then also raise these girls to understand? But like, it's a lot. And I can't even get the question out, because just like a mom to mom, there's this, maybe that's that hollowness you talked about. There's this like responsibility we have as moms, brown moms.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's still a balance of needing to have some kind of joy, but then like there's guilt feeling good and happy too, because others don't have that.
No, for sure. I think just in general, like being in the privileged positions that we are, I think we should be using our voices in the way we can and push forward like awareness. And hey, maybe like this train of thought that you're thinking, that like for me, most of my art is affirmational. We need to tap into the joy and healing in order to push the generation that comes after us forward. And I just think that we're so privileged that we need to be aware of what is going on in the world, that we need to stand up with all of the oppressed people, because if we're not the targeted people at this point, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't mean that we forget other people's oppression, And I think what frustrates me about my generation in particular is that I always hear the phrase, "Oh, Harleen, it's not that serious." We're like, you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be listening to the news that much. Or I honestly, I can't like turn my brain off. My degree was in political science, and yeah, like I've took turns and twists in terms of my education and my career, but I think it made me like more aware of like what's going on in the world. And we always need to like stand up for like what's going up, like with the privilege that we have, and also making our kids aware, and in terms of their understanding that like the privilege that they have and how they can be like good world citizens and be kind people moving forward in this world. And as they say, motherhood and in parenting my kids, it's like a form of resistance as well. Like my existence is resistance, being a fat brown woman that's independent, being a creative, and having two daughters and trying to push it against what society wants to box us in, and pushing the narrative and questioning whatever is told to us that that's the box that we need to be in.
Yeah, no, for sure. I will say that I do respect that you are one of those that pushes against the, hey, it's not that deep, and don't look at these news feeds. Like I get that. And I'm going to be honest, like I was there many years ago myself, because what I thought I knew was like shit. I didn't know. I always talk about the white brown girl that I was. So I was living in this white world. And funny story, when I was in grade 5, I was writing a story, and instead of writing the whole wide world, I wrote the whole white world. And my grade 5 teacher like corrected me and kind of was like made fun of me.
Yeah.
And my sister, my sibling, we always laugh years later, like how ahead I was in grade 5. I knew it. It was the whole white world. And I think when the world is centered around whiteness in that way, we people of color, we get caught in that too, because we want to be sold the life in the way that a lot of these people are living on socials and every day. And I think it's an interesting challenge when we see our own people saying, whatever, like it's nothing to worry about. It's not that bad. Like the US is fine. You can be there and all that. And you think, okay, multiple things can be happening at one time. Maybe it's not that bad for you because you also live in privilege, but it's not that great for others. And I think sometimes we have this hard time seeing multiple things can be going on at once. And I appreciate people like you that recognize as a person of color, your privilege, but also like we need to stand up for those that don't have the capacity to do so. And even if that starts in our own home and teaching our children, the next generation, how to navigate themselves with other humans, whether it's trans, gay, Black, white, Indigenous, our Palestinian friends, like all of that matters when we say it's not that deep, and especially when we're parents. What has motherhood, parenthood taught you, like in the world you live in today, in a way that maybe you wouldn't have known had you not become a mother?
I think you start to get hyper aware of like the messaging out there. Like you spoke about like whiteness. I I feel like I was fighting many battles growing up. White, like the feeling of like whiteness, like feeling the odd one out, like in a group of like a lot of white kids in school, was also an issue. But I think I was also fighting other battles as well. But I understand that completely, because when it comes to motherhood, like I'm protective of my kids, and maybe I wouldn't have thought critically about certain things and issues, but I think about that because I think about the future. And I think a lot of people can be like, whatever, like I'm not gonna be here in whatever years, but I think about the future. I think about like the future kids. I think about the Palestinian kids that won't have a future. I think about the kids in poverty in India. Like I think about many things that I can't just turn it off and just be numb to the world, because it affects our future, affects our kids. And in terms of like even the choice of making sure that I come back to Brampton, I wanted my daughter to go to a school where a lot of the kids looked like her. And I think like being in school, I think one of the things that really, I think me and my sisters were targeted on in terms of bullying was like our facial hair. And
Yeah.
for me, my mom was like, "No, you're not waxing your mustache."
Yeah.
But that was like such a thing, because I think like white people don't need to go through that, because like their hair kind of blends into their skin.
Hell yeah, man.
And
Unibrow,
when
mustache, leg hair,
yeah,
like all of that.
waxing becomes your, or shaving becomes your best friend at a very young age, and that just makes me sad. And even in terms of like beauty standards, now with like the Epstein stuff that's coming out, you see how like the whiteness and also misogyny and these like child predators are dictating what the beauty standards are. And now I'm like resisting. I'm like, why do I care if I have leg hair? Why do I care that if I go a little bit longer of like not waxing or like shaving my face? Like why is that the beauty standard? Like we need to push against it as well. But at the same time, being a mother, I want to protect my kids too.
Yeah.
And also with the Epstein stuff coming out, like just also having a very cautious and worldview that like kids aren't centered in patriarchy, men are essentially.
I think you're so well said on all of this. And I have to like give you a huge high five for picking an area, like geographically, who we are. Like our identity has so much to do with geographic. So like racism and all that, it definitely is interesting in what parts of the city, the world, the country, wherever it is that you live. And I think good for you to pick an area where your kids can be around kids that look like them. I think a lot of the times are even in our own community, people want to like get away from our own community because we stand out. Yeah, we stand out. Like the white people have similar problems, but because we look different, then we think we're all the only problem. And so people are moving out of communities and those kinds of things. I live in a very white neighborhood as well. My oldest son said to me last month, he's like, I love my friends and all that, but like, he's like, I got to find friends of color. And I was like, yes, you do. Because I don't want to recreate what my own pains and all that were. So I just think to be around kids that look like you, that's like such a relief, because you don't have to fight some of those standards. You have other fights, fair enough, but at least you can be around people that look and sound and come from a world that's like similar to yours. And that's definitely something that I wish I had done with the kids as well.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, okay, how do we not overcorrect, but how do we,
Yeah.
you know, bring awareness into the world, because we can still do that. I think
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
there's probably so much, right? It's like becoming a mother and a mother, whether it's to daughters and even to sons, because I have a responsibility with boys, and it's not all on our daughters. It's on these boys as well to, you know, squeeze out the misogyny in them. And that's going to be generations before that happens. But we can do the best we can with my kids and then their kids moving forward. My son said something funny today too. Someone we know is having a baby, and he was, oh yeah, like I'd love to be a girl dad, and I was like, that's like really cool. So I talked about why, like why do you say that? And he was just like connecting to the person that, you know, he looks up to that's having a baby, and he thinks he would be such a good girl dad and the good balance. And I was like, okay, this is a good start. We can keep talking about this. You know, you're 15. I don't want you to be a dad at all right now, but okay, like it's not this, you know, like boys kind of gravitate towards that. The other piece to what you're talking about too is like this, you mentioned it earlier, this good girl thing. Like I think, and maybe I'll ask you, do you think a lot of women, especially us brown women, because that's kind of like our experience, do you feel like they end up living lives that were chosen for them more so than, I guess, like being taught, okay, what being good is mattered more than being honest and real? Do you feel like that's something that comes up for you too when you're trying to parent your girls? Like,
I feel like being good is just, I think, just taught at a very young age for women in general. And I think that definition changes for like boys, because I grew up with like cousins and stuff, and guy cousins, and I saw like the level of goodness change as they're growing. It's like he's a guy, whatever. But for a girl, it's always constant, and like the surveillance, and we weren't taught to question like the patriarchy. Is the control on the women and not the men? And I think that's also important when you're raising boys as well, that like patriarchy also harms men. And I think what we can bring to this world is just like the willing, like we all come from like different backgrounds and different traumas, but I think if we come with the willingness to learn and unlearn the things that have happened in our growing up, and like for me, for example, like unlearning what a good girl is, and who cares, who fucking cares if I'm a good girl also, is another thing that I think I've faced internally as well. And even with like raising my girls, like what's considered a good for them, I think I just want to raise girls that are kind and stand up to injustice and are good community members. But beyond that, like I think the rules that we apply to brown girls, I think is just a means of control, and just unlearning that. And I think growing up, I used to hear this a lot, and I'm sure other brown girls heard it too. It's like, oh, mom, can I go on a girls' trip, whatever? And they'll say, oh, after you're married, you can go with your husband. You know what I mean?
That's a great girls' trip.
Yeah, and then, I remember one time asking my mom, can I get a tattoo? And mom's like, you can get it after you're married. It's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, right?
It's like, why do I need to get permission? Because the thing is, I think they think, like, first we ask our parents for permission, and they think that we're getting into relationships where we have to ask our husbands for permission for these kind of things, and that can be further than the truth. Like, we're our independent people. We gotta unlearn these things. We can't be taught to fit in a mold and put in a little bow tie and be like, hey, perfect wife for this guy over here, or even questioning the concept of heterosexuality and queerness. I think a lot of people weren't afforded to even think about that because they know they wouldn't be accepted. So just having a safe space for my kids, whatever they decide what their gender is and their sexuality is, and just being open and constantly learning about the LGBTQ community as well, because along with like being open with like the like beauty standards, and just being open and learning in every way, so I'm there for kids when they need me.
I love what you're saying, and I think language plays such a huge role. Like even the words that we grew up with, like good, right? Like it's so subjective. Like what does that mean? And then the language that we hear as we get older, or even something so simple because it's so systemic. Like when women are referred to as girls, like you are talking about your children as girls, and now we're grown-ups, and then girls, and it's like, no, we're women. Like there is this, like, I think becomes this internalized oppression when we keep hearing these words, and subconsciously it impacts and we internalize that. So even when we're told, you can ask for permission later as you go to the next house, or when sometimes men are the only ones that are working and there's a very clear line that they create and the women have to stand behind it. And so you don't get to learn as your childhood what it means to go from a girl to a woman, because then you go to the man's house and now you have to figure out how to be in the way that, like you said, in this mold that we're trying to break. And I really encourage us to just even think of the way we use words and be better. Again, raise the bar. Not, that's the generation I grew up in. Like that's great. Great. But like, we don't want to keep talking that way, and we don't want to keep reiterating that same pattern, because especially if you know, these people that grew up in the generation they say they grew up in, they have kids, and now your kids are picking up on that. And I just I get so bothered by it, because I worked in mental health for years, and language was such a huge thing, and how you would talk to clients and you wouldn't use certain words because of the meaning behind it and I had this one supervisor, this was like a huge thing for her, and report writing and stuff, and it's really stayed with me. Sometimes in conversation I'm like, we use we use that word, and that word has such a different meaning behind it. And I think there's so many secret things day to day that we don't even realize when we're interacting with people, and then we're like, how come I feel this way? Well, because people are throwing these words at us all day, and as we are at others. And I don't know. I think we keep reinforcing it without realizing it. You know what I mean? So it's like what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation. Like, we really do want to raise the bar for ourselves so that we can for our kids. And you said it, we have one life, and how do we want to operate in it? So I think that's a part of healing. Recognizing these systems that that patriarchy, misogyny, even white supremacy, it's like a friggin' tornado. Once you get caught in it, you get sucked in, and good luck getting out on the other side, because you're not going to be the same when you do.
No, for sure.
You know?
No, definitely.
But maybe here I can pause and we can do the middle fingers up segment, and then you're going to have to come back, because I didn't go into a lot of the other questions because I wanted to stay with you. And so maybe we have to come back and do some other segments. But middle fingers, if you could put your middle fingers up to something, what would you want to put your middle fingers up to today?
I mean, middle fingers to anything that makes you feel like you can't grow as a person. And I think the patriarchy, middle fingers to the patriarchy, middle fingers to any entity that makes you feel oppressed. And I feel like middle fingers to anyone that shoots down your joy. And I hope if anyone takes anything away from my perspective, is that to just honor your little self and try to find the joy that you have in life, and anything that makes you feel like that it takes away from it. So middle fingers to that.
I love that. And I'm going to join you. I agree with you on that. And let's also talk about your, where can people find you if they want to follow you? Are you selling your art? I know you talk about it being from an affirmation place, but if somebody really likes something, can they buy it?
You can find me on Instagram at Harleen.illustrates, and I am selling my artwork, and I have some journals on Etsy, but right now it's just very, very basic, but I would appreciate the support. But also at the same time, I think what fulfills me at this point is, if anything resonates, let's start a conversation and build a community. And I think that's my goal right now.
Yeah, that was my next question was what kind of impact do you hope your creativity brings to others?
I just hope for better representation, and also from my artwork or my point of view of being that we can talk about difficult things. And also, how can we honor ourselves through the difficult things that we went through? And I'm sure our experiences are collective, and we've gone through similar things. So if there's something that resonates with you, and I would love to hear about it. And I think I get inspiration from not only my life but the people around me. And I think if you enjoy my art, I would love to hear it.
I
And
love
that
that.
encourages me to just keep on putting it out there.
Yeah, I think the best thing we can do, there's so much hate out there. We already know that in comments and stuff, but when something stops us, makes us pause, makes us think, gets us curious, I think it's worth DMing people. And I
Yeah.
like that. This is how I get amazing people like you to come and talk, because it
Likewise.
fuels us. Yeah, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's great feedback for you as well, because it's kind of like sometimes a vulnerable thing to be doing when you're putting yourself out there. And
Yeah,
when
it's
it's
the
radio
hardest thing to do.
silence. Yeah, right? So what kind of feedback have you been getting?
So far, I've been like getting people saying, "Oh, this hits home, it resonates,"
Yeah.
and so far the commentary has been like that. But I feel like what I've gone through in life, I hit many things like grief or the body issues, being motherhood, issues of the world. I'm tapped into that, and I hope I find people through Instagram like yourself that our mindsets are aligned, and I hope that my art speaks to people and makes them have a different perspective on things. I think that will be like amazing as well. So that's like the hope, right? Like even what like your podcast as well, bringing a different perspective to our generation, and that's like what I'm here doing in a different medium as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just it. Like, it's time for our voices. I was talking to a white woman a few weeks ago. She was on my podcast and she's like, man, she's like, I know I'm white, but I feel like we need to have more of like people of color. We need you guys. Like your voices matter. And I was like, okay, well, make room, because I think that's the thing. There is a lot of space out there, and
Yeah.
we definitely don't have to ask for permission anymore. We just have to go and do it and take it and make that choice. And there's a lot of value in that. And I think if we have the mindset of we're doing it to grow and learn, not, oh, this is going to make me, money or famous or whatever. Like, I think if those things happen, great. But it really is like a learning journey for us. And so like in the work that you're doing, I feel like it's similar, and get it out there. And especially what you're doing with the beauty standards, I agree with you. There isn't enough of brown women in different shapes, different colors. I think all of that is something that we need to like see more and more and more. Overcorrect that if you can, because it's been ingrained in us, right?
Like if you search on Pinterest like South Asian art, like you'll see a lighter person, a person in a skinnier body, which is fine. That's like representative, but I don't think a lot of like Punjabi people out there are of that skin tone. And even when I see like I've seen like kids stuff that's marketed towards like Punjabi or Sikh kids, it's like a person of lighter skin, but I'm like, not every person looks like that. There needs to be representation in that way too, and we need to, as you said, create space for that and just keep on putting it out there. And if it hits home, and if someone like my younger self sees it and feels like it resonated, I think I've done my job, and that's enough.
Totally. Yep, I agree. So is there anything that you wished that I asked you today, or that we discussed that maybe hasn't come up?
Is there anything else you would like to talk about? I feel like
I know no one's ever asked me that question after I've asked them. This is the first time.
First one.
Yeah. There's like a billion things I want to talk about, but I also want to take the time to do it. So this is my way of luring you to come back again,
of course,
and have another conversation. Because I think next time we can talk about the job scene too, and working in that corporate world as a woman of color, and all the systems that we talked about today, how that shows up and how you navigate that. I'm sure you have some artwork around that too. And motherhood is always a good thing to keep talking about, parenting and teaching our kids. So I think what we can do in next time is I'll just keep it about one thing, and then we can talk about
For
that
sure.
again if you're game,
I'm
for
game.
that.
I'm game.
So yeah, good. And then like last but not least, if people take only one thing from your conversation today, what do you really hope, Harleen, they take from you today?
I hope that a couple of things. I hope that they realize that like the arts or anything that brings them joy can be the forefront of their life. I know it's scary, but that's where we grow when we're challenging ourselves. And I think I've been on a different trajectory ever since I've been true to who I am and what brings me joy and the little Harleen joy. And secondly is to question the things that we've been taught our whole lives, that and it doesn't need to be the truths that we live in. And we as a community, especially like our generation, we can do better and be more political, because at the same time, I think we as South Asians or Asians in general, we like to align ourselves with like the whiteness, but at the same time we are not white and we have a different set of issues, and we we need to start having these conversations. And like lately, and especially in Canada, there's been a lot of Indian hate, and that impacts our community. And we need to start having these difficult conversations and question. And we deserve more as a community. And religion is based on like seva and community, and bring that to like the forefront as well. Like how can we give back to other people, like other minorities, BIPOC people,
Mm-hmm.
and just I think the world is bleak, but at the same time I do have hope that a lot of people have kindness and hopefully push humanity forward to the better. One can only hope that way.
I'm with you on that. I think it's never too late to understand how politics are patterns, and we live in the midst of that. No matter how many times we say, "Oh, I just don't get into it." The truth of the matter is we are in it based on what car we drive, the clothes we buy, the music we listen to. Like every single thing impacts us on a political level. And I agree with you, looking at aligning with what helps our community versus trying to align with the rich whites up at the top.
Majority,
I
yeah.
think that's not going to help our community. And I think there a lot of times we get picked on for the bad seeds and the struggling that we're seeing in the community. And what we're not understanding is that's an outcome of a system that has failed many of us, and white people have it bad as well. And so when they look to our community and think, "Oh, it's you guys," it's like, no, this is a system thing, and this will continue happening whether you want to stop letting us immigrate here or not.
The system is rigged.
It is rigged. And I think the old timers that have come can also be very helpful in not saying things like, "Well, I didn't immigrate like that, I'm better," because you were sold on a model minority mentality, and you were brought here to be cream of the crop and look a certain way. And you were used as well by the system, so that the system could say, "See, we found some good Asians, some good brown people. This is how you have to be." That's not helpful either. And I think there's so much divide in our community based on, "Well, I was born here," or "I immigrated years ago and I assimilated essentially." And so I think we have to help the people that are struggling in our community. Like like you said, there's a lot there that we can do. And so, so well said.
Thank you. We got to keep on giving them exposure, like through our crafts.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I agree. Because like it'd be great to, rebuild the land that we are all living on that's not ours. I think our Indigenous friends would hope that we could be more respectful on their grounds. And I think we can't forget that when we are living on someone else's land, but treating it like it's not valuable, right? So and you talk about that in your art too, and I appreciate that you cover a lot of that. And I think that's a great way. That's a great way to express that to people, because everybody takes things in a different way, whether it's a hard conversation or through some beautiful bright artwork. There's like lots of ways that we can soak it in, but we do need to raise the bar for ourselves. And I think people like you and I can continue doing that, and there'll be people that'll fight us and there'll be people that'll join us. And at the end of the day, we're thinking about our future, our kids, right? So we keep doing
Definitely.
it. Yeah. So
For sure.
last words, you get to say the last words as we close off. Anything else you want to say as we say peace out, bye? And I hit
Well, I
the,
want to thank you for bringing me on.
oh yeah.
Honestly, I did not anticipate like being invited to your podcast, and I feel so grateful. And thank you so much for having me and sharing my voice into the world. And I haven't really posted much about my life on Instagram, so this is a bit like who is Harleen illustrates and represents like what I represent. So thank you for giving me that exposure, and it was great getting to know you, and hopefully we continue having this conversation.
Oh, that's so well said. And I'm also honored. I'm honored you replied back, and I'm glad I found you. And please keep doing what you're doing. It's definitely making an impact. So let's not stop here.
Thank you. Same to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.